My new boss fired me in exactly 7 minutes. 7. I counted them. I was standing in a freezing glass conference room on the 42nd floor, staring at a pot of coffee so stale it smelled like burnt regret. He thought he had just cut a costumer out of the company. What he didn't realize was that 3 hours later, with a single digital signature on a PDF file, I would turn him into the liability. They saw a quiet senior engineer. They never suspected that for 14 years, I held the patents that powered their entire empire. And now, I was taking them back. My name is Abigail Reed. I am 38 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon, I was the invisible backbone of a company called Nexera Systems. My official title was Senior Systems Architect. Corporate language for the person who keeps the machine alive while executives promise miracles they do not understand. I joined Nexera when it was operating out of a converted warehouse in San Jose that smelled like drywall dust and cheap pizza. I slept under my desk during our Series A crunch. I wrote the core encryption stack while recovering from pneumonia because the deadline would determine whether we survived another quarter. I didn't just breathe innovation. I hyperventilated it for over a decade. That afternoon, I was running a routine compliance audit on our patent renewals. No one asked me to. I just have a habit of checking the foundations before everyone else throws a party on the roof. The door opened without a knock. Daniel Mercer walked in. 6 weeks into his role as VP of Operations, and already carrying himself like a man who had listened to too many leadership podcasts about decisive action. Behind him stood Eric, head of corporate security. Eric couldn't meet my eyes. That was how I knew. This wasn't a review. It was an execution. Abigail, Daniel said, sliding into the chair across from me. No greeting. No small talk. Just a thin manila folder placed between us like a sealed verdict. We're restructuring. The board believes engineering needs fresh energy. More hunger. Hunger. I almost laughed. I had given this company 14 years of missed holidays and canceled vacations. I had written the algorithm that processed nearly $3 million an hour in client transactions. Your position is being eliminated. Effective immediately. Just like that. 14 years reduced to a bullet point. I felt the shock move through my body like cold electricity. But my hand stayed still. Legal has reviewed everything, he added, as if anticipating protest. All IP created during your employment belongs to Nexera. That's standard. I looked at him carefully. Have you personally reviewed the intellectual property portfolio? He smiled. Condescending. Abigail, we have a team of Harvard lawyers. You're an engineer. There it was. The arrogance. The assumption that I was a cog. What Daniel didn't know was that back in 2012, when Nexera was desperate and nearly bankrupt, I had structured my compensation differently. Instead of a full salary, I negotiated ownership of the encryption architecture under my own entity, Reed Innovations LLC. Nexera had been granted an exclusive, royalty-free license. Exclusive. Royalty-free. Conditional. Buried inside that agreement, drafted with the help of a very meticulous attorney friend, was a clause titled termination upon separation. If Nexera terminated my employment without criminal cause, the license would expire 30 days after my final day. 30 days. A quiet fuse. Daniel tapped the folder. If you don't sign today, the severance offer expires. I slid my badge across the table instead. I'll have my lawyer review it. Eric escorted me out. I carried a small cardboard box containing a cactus, a coffee mug that read "World's Okayest Engineer," and a framed photo of my daughter. As the elevator descended, Daniel stepped inside, talking loudly on his phone. We just freed up a huge chunk of budget, he said. Cut the fat. Q3's going to look beautiful. Cut the fat. Tumor. Expensive headcount. In that steel box, something inside me went still. Not angry. Not hysterical. Still. When the elevator doors opened, I walked to my car, placed the box on the passenger seat, and stared at the Nexra logo shining against the blue California sky. Then I made a call. Open the contingency file, I told my attorney, Laura Bennett. Her tone changed instantly. Are you sure? He terminated me effective immediately. A pause. Then the countdown has started, she replied. Do we wait 30 days? No, I said. Send the notice now. At exactly 4:17 p.m., cease-and-desist letters went out to Nexra's legal department and every major enterprise client listed in Appendix C, banks, healthcare providers, federal contractors. The notice was simple. As of today, Nexra's license to the Reed encryption stack would expire in 30 days. Any new deployments after notification constituted willful patent infringement. I wasn't negotiating. I was enforcing a contract. Within an hour, Harold Simmons, Nexra's general counsel, called me. His voice was tight. Abigail, this is aggressive. If you want a better severance, we can talk. This isn't about severance, I replied calmly. It's about ownership. Silence. Then papers shuffling. Then the intake of breath as he reached Article 9, Section 4. You're serious. I always was. That night, I opened a private dashboard tracking Nexra's revenue breakdown. 83% of annual recurring revenue depended on my encryption stack. 83. They hadn't fired an engineer. They had evicted the foundation. And that was only phase 1. Because while legal panic spread through Nexra's executive floor, I made 3 more calls. One to their largest competitor. One to a mid-tier cloud platform eager for enterprise breakthrough. And one to a venture capital firm known for hostile acquisitions. If Nexra wanted to gamble, I would build the table. By midnight, my phone was buzzing with emergency board meeting alerts and frantic emails. I didn't respond. I poured myself a glass of water, turned on soft jazz, and sat in the quiet of my living room. Somewhere downtown, executives were screaming into conference calls. Stock analysts were refreshing dashboards. Legal teams were drafting emergency motions. But in my apartment, there was only silence. They thought they had cut a tumor. What they had actually done was unplug the heart monitor and assume the patient would keep breathing. And they were about to learn how wrong they were. To understand what happened next, you need to know one thing about me. I never build a system with a single point of failure. Not in code. Not in contracts. And not in revenge. If you think this ends with a cease-and-desist letter, you're underestimating me the same way Daniel Mercer did. And that mistake is about to cost them everything. By 8 the next morning, Nexra had filed for a temporary restraining order. They moved fast. Faster than I expected. A courier arrived at my apartment before I had finished my coffee, handing me a thick envelope from Blackwood and Hale, a law firm famous for billing 4 figures an hour and burying opponents under paperwork until they suffocated. The motion accused me of misappropriation of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate sabotage. According to their filing, the encryption stack I claimed to own had actually been developed months before Reed Innovations LLC was formed. They alleged the contract was signed under duress. They painted me as a rogue engineer holding $1 billion company hostage for ransom. I read it twice. Then I smiled. Because they had made one mistake. They had tampered with the timeline. I called Laura. Paragraph 42, I said. They're claiming the core encryption framework was completed in March 2011. Silence on her end. Then a slow exhale. And? I wrote it in June 2012. I still have the original SVN repository logs. And more than that. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out a small external hard drive. Back in the early warehouse days, when Nexera couldn't afford proper documentation staff, I recorded executive strategy meetings to transcribe minutes later. I was obsessive. Paranoid, they called it. I plugged the drive into my laptop and opened a file dated March 14, 2013. The audio crackled through my speakers. It was Daniel's predecessor and our founder, Michael Langford, speaking clearly. "We can't carry the R&D liability on the balance sheet," he said. "Let Abigail's LLC hold the patents. If anything fails, the shell absorbs the risk. We protect Nexera." Another voice chimed in. "She's fine owning it on paper. She just wants architectural control." Michael laughed. "Win-win. We get the tech. She gets the ego boost." I exported the clip and sent it to Laura with one line, Exhibit D. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning in Federal District Court. Nexera's legal team argued I had coerced a struggling startup into signing an unconscionable agreement. They said no company would knowingly surrender its core IP. Then Laura requested permission to play the recording. The judge allowed it. The courtroom filled with the younger voice of Michael Langford calmly explaining how using my LLC insulated Nexera from investor risk and potential patent litigation. The silence that followed was devastating. Nexera's attorney attempted to pivot, but the judge cut him off. "Your client renewed this agreement for 10 consecutive years," she said evenly. "You built 80% of your revenue on top of it. This court will not rescue you from your own strategic decisions." The motion for a restraining order was denied. Just like that, ownership was affirmed. Outside the courthouse, reporters were already gathering. Someone had leaked the audio. By that evening, tech media had picked up the story. Headlines were merciless. "Billion-dollar oversight. The engineer who owned the empire." Nexera's stock dropped 12% before closing bell. But while public sentiment shifted in my favor, Nexera launched a second offensive. Anonymous blog posts labeled me a corporate extortionist. Social media threads accused me of sabotaging infrastructure. My LinkedIn inbox flooded with strangers calling me greedy, unstable, dangerous. It was a classic smear campaign. Discredit the woman so no one touches her. What Nexera didn't anticipate was that Daniel Mercer would overplay his hand. In a moment of panic, he emailed the CTO of Nexera's largest competitor, accusing me of trafficking stolen property and threatening litigation if they hired me. The problem? He sent that email after the federal ruling affirming my ownership. Laura nearly laughed when she saw it. "That's defamation per se," she said. "He just handed us leverage on a silver platter." Meanwhile, I met with Ethan Calder, CTO of Vertex Dynamics, Nexera's fiercest rival. We didn't meet in a boardroom. We met at a taco stand in the Mission District. Ethan wore jeans and a faded t-shirt, nothing corporate about him. He listened as I laid out the structure, exclusive licensing of the Reed encryption stack, direct reporting to him as chief systems architect, and a $5 million hiring fund to absorb displaced Nexera engineers. "You're building a lifeboat," he observed. "I'm building an ecosystem," I replied. He extended his hand. Done. Back at Nexera, chaos reigned. Engineers were ordered to rebuild the encryption framework from scratch in 2 weeks. It was impossible. Code that integrated across authentication, billing, and database layers cannot be amputated overnight without hemorrhage. Internal leaks later revealed the board was split. One faction argued to settle immediately. Buy the patents. Apologize. Stabilize the stock. The other, led by Daniel and backed by Michael's wounded pride, insisted conceding would signal weakness to investors. They chose to fight reality instead of accept it. That decision sealed their fate. 2 weeks later, I received a formal invitation to attend an emergency board meeting. Laura advised against it. I went anyway. The red stock ticker glowed across the boardroom wall like a warning flare. Daniel presented a strategic pivot plan involving layoffs and a 12-month rebuild. Then Sarah Jenkins, an independent board member, held up a printed copy of his threatening email to Vertex Dynamics. "Is this how we conduct ourselves?" she asked. Daniel stammered. The room shifted. When it came time to vote between licensing my technology under revised terms or attempting a full rebuild, the board split evenly. 5 votes for settlement. 5 for defiance. The deciding vote fell to Michael Langford. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He had a choice: swallow his pride, issue a public apology, and preserve the company. Or protect his ego and risk collapse. He chose ego. "I will not sign a public admission," he said quietly. The vote tipped toward defiance. They would liquidate before apologizing. I stood, gathered my folder, and spoke one final sentence. "You didn't build this empire. You rented it." I walked out. Within 3 months, Nexera filed for Chapter 11 restructuring. Vertex Dynamics absorbed their largest enterprise clients under my licensing agreement. Over 50 former Nexera engineers joined my new division. No layoffs on my team. No midnight purges. No buzzwords about trimming fat. We built clean systems with clean contracts. A year later, I drove past the old Nexera tower. The logo had been replaced. Glass and steel don't collapse dramatically. They just change ownership. That's the lesson Daniel never understood. You can fire a person in 7 minutes. You cannot erase 14 years of architecture with a severance package. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been treated like a line item instead of a load-bearing wall, remember this: read what you sign. Own what you build. And never confuse silence with weakness. If you were in my position, would you have saved Nexera, or let it burn? Comment below. I read every one. If this story reminded you of your own worth, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the quietest engineer in the room is the one holding the keys.